Ahoy hoy Springfieldians, and welcome to the Treehouse of Horror Death Count Part 2. If you haven't seen the first part of this video where I count the deaths from the Treehouse 1 to 10, then I'd suggest watching that first, as I'll be continuing to count from where I left off. And let's face it, especially in this list, every kill counts. If you thought that the first kill count was high, you haven't seen anything yet, as these Treehouse specials get even more sadistic, twisted, and bloodier than before. So let's not waste any more time and jump straight to it. I'm Lydia, and this is Treehouse of Horror Death Count 11 to 15. I just want to say a big thank you to my latest Flying Hellfish patron, Liam Elvin. Liam, you and your fellow members are really helping me dedicate more time to the channel and allowing me to make it better and better. So thank you very much. Alright, I'll hold my hands up. I was a bit numpty last time and I forgot to include a couple of slicing and dicing points. So I'm going to include the shooting of the high school basketball team captain from the Treehouse 6, as well as Lisa announcing that Patty and Selma are dead in Treehouse 5, and of course the Simpson family being electrocuted in Treehouse 8. So let's just slide through this embarrassing bit and add those to the counter. Treehouse of Horror 11. The episode starts with a parody of the 1964 classic, The Monsters. A family of friendly monsters having misadventures and never quite understanding why people react to them so strangely. Sounds familiar? Well, it seems that way as the Simpsons come out dressed as the iconic characters from the hit show. But they are soon attacked by an angry mob, leaving only Lisa alive. In Ghost Dad, Homer dies in the most brutal and unforgiving way. He chokes on a piece of broccoli. This is why we stay away from vegetables, people. As Springfield's most elite practitioner, Dr. Nick, says, stick to your neglected food groups. And as Homer rises into heaven, he is met by St. Peter, who tells Homer he has to do one good deed in order to get through to the Golden Gates. So he is sent back down to Earth to complete this task. And he means well by lifting up Agnes and trying to help her across the road, but he soon drops her, where she plummets into oncoming traffic. In Scary Tales Can Come True, it's an amalgamation of lots of different fairy tale references. But we see probably more the Brothers Grimm version than the Disney versions we see today, as these characters have a bit of a more gruesome ending. Cute little Goldilocks, who upon waking up from the bed that was just right, is mauled by 3 bears. And then there's Rapunzel, who is always draping her beautiful long hair out the window, but when hefty Homer comes along and tries to climb up it, he ends up tearing out her entire scalp. And then there's a reference to Hansel and Gretel, where Bart and Lisa find a gingerbread house where they're invited in by Suzanne the Witch. And this is when she intends to eat the children, so begins fattening up Bart. But before she does kill them, she is pushed into the oven herself. This is one of those segments that's almost a direct copy of the original story. The cannibalistic witch fattens up Hansel, but the kids outsmart the witch and the witch dies. They steal her stuff and they live happily ever after. Oh yeah, and their stepmom dies and they end up having to live with the same father that threw them out into the middle of the forest in the first place. So yeah, no happy ending really. And poor Suzanne, she didn't even get to go on a date with George Cauldron. In the final segment, Night of the Dolphin, this goes down as one of the bloodiest and perhaps oddest so far. This segment is a parody of the 1973 movie The Day of the Dolphin, where Dr. Jake Terrell, played by George C. Scott, trains his dolphins to speak and understand English. In the episode, the dolphins are obviously sick of being mistreated like common seals, and decide to fight back and take over the planet. And they start their invasion by drowning Lenny, who was purely enjoying some late night drinking in the sea. The slippery fiends then rip the captain in half, and they start to march through Springfield. And their takeover is depicted through the beheading of everyone's favourite squeaky-voiced teen. Ken Brockman is beaten to death by a dolphin with a beach ball, and then the dolphin proceeds to kill the cameraman. I bet Arnie Pie was pretty pleased that he was in the sky on that day. And poor Grandpa Simpson was then eaten by a dolphin. And while at the town meeting, a dolphin smashes through the window and impales itself through groundskeeper Willie. But fed up with these dolphins, the town decide to fight back, and an all-out battle ensues. And Comic Book Guy's neck gets broken by repeatedly being slammed in a car door. After this intense battle, rivaling the return of the king, the Springfieldians lose the war and are sent to live in the sea. We see Krusty the Clown laying face down in the water, having drowned. His floating corpse then drifts over to join 49 other bodies to form the word "the end." Treehouse of Horror 12. So maybe a not so fun but still interesting fact, this was the first Halloween special where the writers didn't have scary names in the credits. This was due to the terrorist attacks on September 11th, after which the staff were trying to be more sensitive. However, Mike Scully, who also worked on the show as a showrunner, stated that the scary names were also removed because they turned into shameless plugs for side projects done by the other Simpsons creators. Very sneaky. The episode opens with Smithers putting up Halloween decorations like a good assistant, only to fall off the roof and slide into a fuse box, and he is of course electrocuted. We then see the Simpsons family out trick-or-treating, where Homer is dressed like Fred Flintstone. And this is maybe a more fun fact, the Simpsons creators had Fred Flintstone in mind when designing Homer. He was even going to have Barney Gumble as his neighbour and his best friend. Barney Rubble? Barney Gumble? Get it? Anyway, the family then see the mansion on fire and flee in terror, and they run through Mr. Burns' extremely sharp fence, slicing them apart like good old-fashioned Italian bologna. In Hex and the City, Homer is cursed after insulting a gypsy, and a hex is placed on him and everyone he loves. So Marge grows a beard, and Bart's neck stretches and elongates, to the point where he doesn't even have the strength to lift up his own head, and he drowns in his own cereal, as a leprechaun dances on his head. And this curse extends to his barmates when a helicopter crashes into the ceiling and crushes Lenny and Carl. And of course, whilst the destruction is happening, Moe is drowned in his own pickle jar. And in the final segment, WizKids, which of course is a parody on Harry Potter, Bart and Lisa are the wizard students to take on Dark Lord Montimort. They manage to beat the evil wizard by stabbing him in his enchanted shin. His lifeless body is then swallowed by snake slithers, in a strange but oddly arousing scene. Treehouse of Horror 13. So this is the episode that really spawned my idea of Maud Flanders being absolutely evil. So evil in fact that she was probably the spawn of Satan. Either that or she was probably making spawn with Satan behind Neddy's back. Anyway, in the first segment, Sending the Clones, a spoof of 1996's Multiplicity, Homer makes numerous copies of himself using a magic hammock. He does this to help with the household chores. And for all you production art fans, this was the first episode to use digital ink as a proof of concept, which led to the decision to have the Simpsons animation converted from traditional cel to digital ink and paint. And Sending the Clones was particularly useful to this, as the technique was able to cope with the cloning sequences, which required many different layers of animation to use for each clone. However, these clones caused a bit of trouble in the animation universe, as soon enough they decapitated stupid sexy Flanders. So Homer then decides to dump the clones in a field, but they end up making even more clones of themselves, and they start to eat up the town's entire supply of corn, duff, and even poor old Gil. In a way to get rid of the copious amounts of Homers, the clones are led to a cliff edge with a giant donut, where they all fall to their deaths. And from my calculations, judging from the size and density, that's 30 plus 80, carry the 3 times the 12, you have no idea. So I'm gonna guess there's at least 100 Homers here, plus the one clone who was electrocuted, and yeah, the additional 3 clones Homer shot. In the fright to creep and scare harms, future Homer comes back to the past to warn Springfield about gun violence, only to be ironically shot by Moe, who, let's face it, has a serious mob mentality problem. The final segment, The Island of Dr. Hibbert, is a parody of 1996's The Island of Moreau, which is very, very, very horrifying in itself. But in the Simpsons version, the Springfieldians are of course transformed into animals by of course everyone's favourite kinky doctor, Dr. Hibbert. Professor Frink is even served up for dinner after being turned into a turkey. Treehouse of Horror 14. So this episode doesn't even go from 1 to 100, it goes 1 to frickin' a million. The episode starts with Grandpa on fire, Homer beating Bart and Lisa with a baseball bat, all before Marge paints the walls with Homer's blood. So that's 4 kills in under 1 minute. In Reaper Madness, Homer takes over the job as the Grim Reaper by knocking down the poor guy with a bowling ball. And this segment is of course the reference to the Santa Claus film, starring Tim Allen, who has to take on the role of Santa after accidentally killing him. A bit sinister when you think about it. As Death himself, Homer wastes no time in abusing his power, killing Jasper, a homeless man, and 17 other people at a baseball game. And also, this little lady is killed by a flying baseball. And the final soul he claims is Patty, who he disguises as Marge in order to trick God into not taking away his beloved. In Frankenstein, Professor Frink reanimates his father's corpse, but Frink Sr. is unimpressed with his new robot parts and lack of genitals in the traditional sense. So he goes on a murderous rampage, first by ripping out Ned's heart, and then tearing out Seymour's spine, so Frank Sr. can have better posture. He then kills and uses various body parts of Sideshow Mel, Mr. Burns, and Apu upon many, many more. And not content with his mismatched appearance, he also wants to be more intelligent, and he gains this by ripping out the brains of 5 scientists. But before he can collect more cerebrums, he is kicked in the groin by his son, and this kills him. Fun fact, Frank Sr. is voiced by comedian Jerry Lewis. Voice actor Hank Azaria based Frank's voice and mannerisms on the 1963 film The Nutty Professor, which starred Lewis in the leading role. In the very obviously named segment, Stop the World, I Want to Goof Off, Bart and Milhouse are able to stop time, and they goof off. In one scene, we see Bart cleaning his family, and whilst polishing Homer's head, it topples off of his shoulders. Which means when time is finally resumed, Homer would instantly be decapitated. And as time continues, Martin is beaten to death by an angry mob. Treehouse of Horror 15. The episode starts with Kang and Kodos' TV special entitled Keeping It Kodos. The Simpsons family are cooked and then eaten, but Bart somehow survives after being digested and bursts out of the alien's stomach. This obviously impresses the aliens, who then adopt the little tyke. In the Ned Zone, Flanders gains the ability to foresee the deaths of anyone he touches. And poor old Dr. Hibbert is the first person who he envisions dying, watching him fall out of a window. Next he watches Hans Moleman being ripped apart by crocodiles. And when Neddy touches Homer, he sees a vision of himself shooting him, which ends up becoming true, but in doing so, Homer's lifeless body then hits the nuclear destruct button, blowing up Springfield. But we don't see how many people perished in this explosion, but in heaven, we see Ned, Marge, Lisa, Bart, and Maggie. But hey, maybe the other Springfieldians were out of town that day. Finally, we have 4 beheadings and a funeral, which is based on the London Ripper murders. The Ripper, portrayed by Wiggum, starts his murder spree by repeatedly stabbing a prostitute. His next victims are Comic Book Guy, who is stabbed in the back, and Selma Bouvier, who is stabbed in the chest. And when Wiggum is confronted for his crimes, he flees in a hot air balloon, but his balloon pops and crashes and therefore kills him. And all of this ended up being a dream dreamt by Ralph Wiggum, who was having a whale of a time smoking opium. This may explain why Ralph kept seeing a leprechaun which told him to burn things. So that's it, that's the end of the video. Thanks for sticking around until the end. The total count so far is 488 deaths. That's insane, and we haven't even finished. Part 3 is released next week, so be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications. So that wraps up Treehouse of Horror 11 to 15. Which of these kills were your favourites? And which Treehouse special do you like the most? Let me know in your comments below. I would like to take this moment to say thank you to my gorgeous Flying Hellfish Patreons, James Whitehead, Timothy Belson, Who Else But Zane, and Liam Elvin. If you'd like to support the channel and get early access to videos and have a safe space to talk about some Simpsons, then check out the link in my description below. Thank you very much for watching, and smell you later.